On this show, we often speak of how critical nature is for our survival. Hello and welcome, I'm Sadhika Tiwari and you're watching Eco India. But it is our own unsustainable human activity that is the biggest threat for our planet. So what can we as individuals do to save and preserve our ecosystems? On today's episode, let's meet a few individuals who are dedicated to making a difference. We begin in the south of India and the town of Auroville. It is an experimental eco-village with an international community which is known for its massive reforestation initiative that started some 4 decades ago. Today, a team of specialists cares for these green lungs. Simply put, they're tree doctors trying to look after each and every one of their patients.
They look like lumberjacks, kitted out with heavy chainsaws, harnesses, fuel canisters and helmets. But rather than felling trees, these men are on a mission to save them. Here in the South Indian township of Auroville, every tree counts. That's why a homegrown team of experts tends to its greenery.
When I was young, my father had a friend who was starting to build tree houses. So as a sample, they built one in our backyard. There's such a different view and experience that you get being up there and feeling the wind blowing on you and feeling the breath of the tree. That's something I feel to this very day.
Bhagirat Prakash cares for Auroville's trees together with Jonas Sushanek, the founder of maintenance company Tree Care. They both grew up here and witnessed the community's reforestation efforts turn this once barren region to a lush green landscape. The transformation instilled in them a love for nature, which they turned into a career.
The profession arborist or arboriculture it comes from the Latin word arbor, which is tree, and so we are tree professionals. We are, I think, how I see it is that we provide a bridge between nature and our urban environment.
In the last decade, the state of Tamil Nadu, where Auroville is located, has lost thousands of trees to cyclones. These are growing more frequent due to human-induced climate change. A powerful storm in 2011 wreaked havoc in resident Agathe Folquez's yard. She was distraught by the thought of having to fell her favorite tree.
It was during the cyclone, and the morning, all the garden, it was completely destroyed. And I am going to the swimming pool to check how is it. And I saw this tree who was completely cutting in 2 parts. And I say it was very large, you know, you see that? It's grow from 2011. And it is there, it was the same. It was completely open there. From there, completely at the end. It's for me absolutely impossible to imagine we have to cut this tree. The damage, you see.
Luckily, the experts at Tree Care had a solution.
We did our research, we try and figure out what's the best way of going about it. And we finally settled on a bracing method that is quite popular also in Europe, using threaded rods. We actually drilled through the entire tree with a really long drill bit and inserted a threaded rod, created some metal plates to basically force that closure again.
But even with their best efforts, arborists can't save every tree. They typically come into the picture once it is already affected by illness or damage. Even though trees can be surprisingly adaptive in urban environments, they are often susceptible to disease and root damage. Alan Lescure is an Auroville-based arborist specialized in the management of urban trees. He advocates preserving mature trees in new building developments.
I'm actually going and looking at the trees on the site to look at sort of how long these trees, each individual tree will be there for. I plot them on a map so that it can be integrated in an architect's drawing. They're all geolocated. We're looking at their their health, looking at their condition, their structural condition. We're looking at how rare they are, how old they are, how long they are going to be there for, how much longer they're going to be there for. And based on all of these factors, you can essentially grade them.
This approach helps boost urban greenery's resilience to the stresses of a changing climate such as drought, as well as to pollution and a loss of biodiversity in the urban ecosystem. Auroville's tree doctors are always on the lookout for early warning signs of stress.
Here's another clear sign that this tree is dying back. All these shoots are actually from the same tree. It's coming from the roots. And these are stress shoots. As the top of the tree, the canopy is dead, it needs to find a new source of energy. And so it's shooting out all these new epicormic shoots in a last-ditch attempt to create a new canopy for itself.
Tree care trains aspiring arborists, teaching them how to adapt scientific techniques used in different parts of the world to local conditions. It's Jonas Sushanik's hope that this new crop of practitioners will help spread a sensitive approach to tree maintenance, well beyond the treetops of Auroville.
Here in India, cities, millions of cats, dogs, monkeys and cows roam the streets with no access to food, water or shelter. These strays suffer extreme weather events that are becoming more frequent because of human-induced climate change. We met a woman in Pune who was so moved by their plight that she decided to take action, a step that benefits many kinds of wild animals today that share spaces with humans.
The main turning point to sort of start the organization was there was a dog who had a disease called canine distemper. And, just watching it die without getting any kind of relief, their suffering should not be there. This was in early 2007. I had a job at that time. I was working with a healthcare company and I decided to quit. I had it in my mind that I want to start an organization, because there's only so much you can do alone. My name is Neha Panchamya. I'm the founder and president of Rescue Charitable Trust. I would call myself an animal rescue specialist. I'm a born and brought up Mumbai girl in that sense. All I saw around me were dogs and cats and birds, so those were the first ones that I started to rescue. In 2014, when the slaughter ban was enforced, nobody thought of the aftermath of what's going to happen with that. So suddenly you have a whole load of cattle that's abandoned and eating plastic, getting into road accidents. So that's when we started doing more large animal work. In 2007, when I started, there was literally nobody providing emergency services for any kind of animals. So you're either rescuing an animal on field, or you're bringing the animal into the rescue center because it needs additional help. So it's cared for here, where it undergoes rehabilitation and then is reintroduced back to the wild. Or the third situation you kind of respond to is, a conflict situation where you're trying to mitigate a conflict that's happening. Now, that, for example, could be, maybe a leopard made a livestock kill and people are angry, about it, and you're trying to mitigate that. Our prevention activities are focused on community awareness, education. Began as a couple of friends trying to do good for animals in the world. What you see today is first responders, you see rehabilitators, you see a veterinary department. The organization is completely funded by donations only. I think we're at a point where incidents are higher simply because of so many changes in our environment. one of the visions that I have is to develop a network of remote squads. And this basically means to provide employment to local people who are passionate about conserving their habitat, conserving wildlife, and skilling them, equipping them. It's about keeping, wildlife wild. It's about sending them back to the wild. We're not a zoo. And the best part is when you release them back out, they don't even turn and look at you.
Aviation is expanding in many countries, including India. It is also one of the fastest growing sources of greenhouse gas emissions. It generates air pollution and noise pollution. But does that mean we stop flying? Well, that seems a little difficult. But if our scooters and our cars can work on electricity, then why can't airplanes? My colleague Aditi Rajagopal took to the skies of Sweden to find an answer.
It won't surprise you to hear that how we fly today needs to change. Aviation makes up for around 3% of global emissions, and okay, that really doesn't sound so bad. But by 2050, that number is projected to rise to over 8 times that, and there are no real ways to fly pollution-free. So it is worrying. One of the most promising solutions to aviation pollution are biofuels, or more broadly, sustainable aviation fuels. They're mostly made from non-petroleum products like biomass or algae. You can basically just swap the fossil fuels in here for biofuels or make a blend. But we need so much of it that scaling up is very hard. And the land could be used for other purposes like growing food or saving forests. And then there's also hydrogen that's showing promise, especially hydrogen made sustainably, and a lot of prototypes are being tested. Electric planes are a third option, and they can make a really compelling case.
Up here where we live, we run off hydropower or wind power, so the electricity we have is sustainable and renewable. So of course that's the most sustainable we can do right now for us.
This is Johan Norberg, a scholar of aviation and one of the only people flying e-planes every day. We're at an aviation school in Sweden, where future pilots are being trained in flying electric planes. The Pipistrel Velis they fly here doesn't need much electricity. It takes around an hour and a half to charge, on which it can fly 45 minutes with a reserve of 30% battery. It's mostly used for pilot training or privately. Skellefteå Airport has a 1 megawatt charging station, which is enough to charge a small fleet of electric planes at the same time.
It's like a bathtub to get in, so ass first is easiest. Yep.
I'm ready.
All right, let's go.
Way! Oh my god!
Yeah, it's fast.
Oh my god, it's really fast! Ooh. This is a super light plane, but it can only carry 2 people with no hand luggage. To go any bigger, e-planes are faced with a big problem: heavy batteries. For a Boeing 747 to fly from, say, London to Istanbul, batteries will need to be this much heavier than a full tank. This just can't work, since this would be 10 times heavier than the heaviest payload ever lifted.
When you're storing energy, you need a very high level of energy density.
That's Scott Carey, head of the airports program at the US Department of Energy's National Renewable Energy Lab.
And petroleum-related products, or petroleum-derived products like biofuels, have a really high energy density.
When compared to the energy density of traditional fuel, batteries fare very poorly, coming in at only 2%. But conventional aircrafts we fly in today are built for jet fuel. It all started with a design off in the 1950s between propeller planes that were more popular at the time and turbine engines like this.
The performance characteristics between those two aircraft were the turbine was slightly faster, but it couldn't go as far. And, you got marginal gains by doing it. And then 5 years later, they figured out for different sizes, for different configurations, all of a sudden it makes sense to use these because of how light you can make those turbines.
Over time, this turbine or tube and wing design became vastly more efficient, a clear winner of the race. Today's jetliners burn almost 50% less fuel per passenger kilometer than they did 50 years ago, with the help of better engines, improved aerodynamics, and a lot of other often invisible changes. But the thing is, this design has peaked in a way. It's very hard to become more carbon efficient unless you squeeze even more people onto already very tight planes. So governments and many in the industry are going back to the drawing board to redesign. This is Tom Budd, an aviation expert who looks at on-the-ground infrastructure to support the transition by working together with Heathrow Airport.
We looked at two main modes of operation for doing that. One which was a battery charging system, so where the battery would remain fixed within the aircraft. You would plug it in as if you would like a normal device. You would just charge it.
This would be the simplest way, operationally speaking. But they also found that charging would waste precious time when current air traffic relies on a quick turnaround. Planes would occupy limited space in the airport. And of course, the amount of power needed would take away significantly from the city's grid.
The second sort of mode of operation that we looked at was a battery swapping system. And that would be where you would have pre-charged batteries. And then when an aircraft came in, you would remove the battery from the airframe and then swap it with one that had already been pre-charged.
This would save space and time, but would require a lot of specialization which we currently don't have anywhere. And it would be a big risk. Meddling with an airframe is always dangerous, and there's also the major risk of fires from holding so many batteries in one place.
So of the two systems, we favored the battery charging system, but we were very aware of the potential limitations that that could pose.
So, not easy.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, I mean, you can fly if you want.
No. What do I do? Ah!
No, if you want the nose to go down, then you push the stick forward. If you want to.
No, please take it back. Wow, that was too much power. I can't handle that.
Pipistrels were the first planes to be certified, but this is another huge challenge that aviation has compared to cars, being certified for safety. So everything takes time for R&D, testing, including for battery safety and the years-long certification process. But this January, the European Parliament pushed for the idea of more E-planes for short and mid-range flights. This is part of a wider goal to cut 90% of emissions from transport by 2050.
All right.
Thank you. That was great.
The company that made the Pipistrel is now working on a 4-seater plane. And there are already bigger ones. A plane called Alice that could carry 9 passengers and 2 crew members seems to be close to commercialization, promising to fly around 400 kilometers. Hart Aerospace in Sweden has a proof-of-concept aircraft that could fly 25 passengers up to 800 kilometers by 2026.
When you look at, if you think about, there are existing cargo routes that use small aircraft. There are existing communities that their only connection is a 9-seat aircraft, unless they take a ferry for 4 or 6 hours type of a situation. Those are real existing routes that have to be either subsidized or paid for by communities.
This is the main application so far, and it is significant. In 2020, the US spent $326 million to subsidize the costs of aircrafts to smaller airports that don't see a profit. Air ambulances, air taxis, and small cargo planes also need only small aircrafts. DHL has ordered 12 planes for low-emissions postal deliveries, which can help local noise and air quality too. A study by the International Center on Clean Aviation estimates that electric aircraft could cover 9% of the commuter market. That's flights with more than 19 passengers and distances shorter than 500 kilometers. But this only accounts for 0.002% of global aviation. By 2050, they estimate it could be up to 0.2%, which is still small when we're talking about carbon emissions. But this is purely electric we're talking about.
You could also have versions of hybrid. So you could have a series hybrid, which is where essentially fuel is used to power an electric motor, which then powers the aircraft. So you're using fuel to charge a battery, essentially. And then you also have what are called parallel hybrids, which is where you have the electric motor and the fuel source, so kerosene or hydrogen, both being used for propulsion.
I can't imagine this tiny plane getting much bigger in the next few years, but the hybrid argument really makes sense. The IATA estimates that hybrids will be the next leap in aviation in the 2030s, and this will contribute to a 40% reduction in emissions by 2050. Longer flights will most likely use biofuels, with some parts of the plane electrified, and some use of hydrogen. The Pipistrel is a small step, but it gives hope for the potential of the diversity of technologies that we're going to need.
Coming back to the topic of trees, forests are key to combating climate change. They are the largest storehouses of climate warming carbon after oceans. And yet, deforestation continues at alarming rates across the world, including here in India. 50 years ago, women from the Chipko movement started an inspiring fight to save the trees of northern Uttarakhand. Today, a woman in Uganda is using their protest methods to spread awareness on the dangers of deforestation.
Patricia Ariakot spent 15 hours hugging this tree when disaster struck. Hard, a lightning strike and power cut ended her world record attempt. But the Ugandan activist didn't give up. In January 2024, Patricia hugged this tree for more than 16 hours straight and is now officially registered in the Guinness Book of World Records. What looks like a fun stunt has a serious background, though, and Patricia wants to draw attention to it.
The problem of climate change is huge, and at least now the world is just waking up to it. It's about time that we pick up the pace and plant these trees, because our natural forests are gone. We are using up the trees and not minding to replace them.
A statement that is especially true for Uganda, which has one of the worst deforestation rates in the world. According to the online tracking portal Global Forest Watch, the country has lost more than 1 million hectares of tree cover between 2001 and 2022. For Patricia, this loss needs to be addressed. She says trees are key to facing our climate challenges.
Trees have very, very enormous advantages. At this very moment, I'm breathing in the freshest oxygen probably in the world, because I'm getting it direct from a tree, and at the same time it's taking in my carbon dioxide.
Just talking about trees is not enough for Patricia. She wants to help bring them back where they were lost in Uganda. For this, she needs the help of upcoming generations and a good idea to get their attention. In this case, it's wooden pencils filled with tree seeds. With these plantable pencils in her luggage, the activist regularly makes community outreaches, mainly in schools in eastern Uganda. So today, tree education is on the schedule for this class.
It's very important that they understand the journey they're about to take on, which is tree planting. And I want them to start the process from a seed. So this particular pencil, for it has seeds inside. And they're using it to study, but at the end of the day, it's going to translate into a tree. A tree was cut, and a tree is going to be planted. That is what I want them to basically understand from this. So you use your pencil.
The activist hopes that she can help the students to value trees more.
You said, and when you talk of planting, don't just put there in the soil, then for you go. You're supposed to water.
In this school, Patricia's tree and planting education was well received.
It has come at the right time when our region and the country at large is in need of mitigating climate change. For we all know how much our communities are destroying the trees, hence causing drastic climate change. So it is really in good time.
It takes decades until a seed has reached the size of these trees. All the more reason, says Patricia, to begin embracing them sooner rather than later.
My satisfaction would be that people see trees as things that we should love, that we should protect, and eventually plant. So you're seeing me do this, maybe it could take something in your mind as well, you know, that trees could be precious things that we can live very, very well with.
Such inspiring people and ideas. Do you know people who are trying to make a difference and saving the planet in big or small ways? Write to us. You can email us or reach out to me directly on my social media handles. I will see you next week. Until then, take care. Goodbye. Namaskar.